Deborra-Lee Furness has taken a swipe at her ex-husband Hugh Jackman after confirming she is filing for divorce. She has spoken for the first time about what she describes as a journey of betrayal. For 30 years, Hugh Jackman told every interviewer, every audience, and every camera pointed music at him that his wife was the best thing that ever happened to him. He said it so often, for so long, that the world just accepted it as one of Hollywood's few true love stories. Their divorce was finalized on a Monday in June 2025, and within months, he was apparently planning a wedding with someone else. Now, Deborra-Lee Furness, the woman who was there before the fame, before Wolverine, before any music of it has spoken, and what she chose to say after nearly 2 years of silence is the sort of thing that makes you go back and look at every public utterance he ever made about her, and wonder just how long the chasm had been between what he was saying and what was actually the case. The wedding that started all. Before we get to what Deborra-Lee actually said, it's worth knowing what compelled her to say anything at all. Because she said nothing for almost 2 years after the announcement of the separation. She did one interview. She went to a film screening. She let the story linger in the tabloids, but she didn't feed it. Such sustained music, public silence from a woman with every reason to speak is its own statement, and it makes the moment she did speak considerably more important. It was not the farewell that shattered that silence. It wasn't the divorce filing in May 2025. It was the swiftness of what followed. By the end of 2025, there were rumors that Hugh Jackman had proposed to Sutton Foster on a New Year's vacation in Costa Rica. Friends say he was telling them about the engagement before Sutton's own divorce from screenwriter Ted Griffin was even finalized. By early 2026, entertainment outlets were reporting that the couple were planning a intimate private ceremony in New York with Ryan Reynolds, reportedly lined up as best man and a guest music list heavily drawn from Hugh's Australian circle. Then there was the detail sources close to Deborra-Lee described as the most cutting part of it all. Hugh had not planned to sign a prenup with Sutton, sources say, despite the fact that he had made an estimated $387 million fortune during his first marriage. A fortune built, in no small part, over the years Deborra-Lee was beside him, raising their children, moving around the world for his career, and providing the kind of stable domestic foundation that allows a person to concentrate entirely on becoming one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. You don't need me to tell you that not having a prenup with a new partner after a marriage of that length and financial size is the kind of detail that speaks for itself. It just drops. When asked how Deborra-Lee felt about Hugh, sources close to the actress said, "It was a real kick in the teeth. When Sutton and he appeared in public together," he said, "not anger, not a long-standing grievance, just that phrase, delivered with the particular flatness of one who's already taken the worst of it and is just reporting on what's left." Apparently left is a woman who bought the Manhattan penthouse they shared for $1.7 million 2 days before filing for divorce. She had that property in her name before she even filed a single document. That's not the reaction of someone who is surprised. That's the move of someone who'd been quietly preparing for an outcome she could see coming long before it came publicly. The Daily Mail quoted Deborra-Lee Furness's statement as being the complete opposite of the cautious corporate language used in the joint announcement of their separation 2 years prior. She wrote of the traumatic journey of betrayal and said, "It is a deep wound that cuts deep." That word, betrayal, was no accident. It was selected by a woman who waited 2 years to speak and took her first real shot to say exactly what she meant. To understand the weight of that word, you have to go back 30 years. Music, because the story of how this marriage began explains almost everything about why it's ending the way it is. She was the star. He was the new boy. Here's the part of this story that gets lost in the reporting of the divorce. Deborra-Lee Furness was no stranger. Actress who has made herself known as Hugh Jackman's wife. She was an established, award-winning performer long before Hugh Jackman was part of any public discussion. And that context is hugely important when you try to understand what the last 30 years actually cost her. She studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. She worked in the United States on Falcon Crest before returning to Australia, where she made her mark as one of the most respected actresses in the nation. She won Best Actress at the Australian Film Critics Circle in 1988 for her leading role in the film Shame. By the time she was cast in the lead role of the 1995 television series Corelli, Deborra-Lee Furness was a name familiar to Australian audiences and industry professionals. Hugh Jackman was 25 and fresh from drama school. His first professional acting job was with the company of actor and playwright Corelli. He played a convict. She played the psychologist assigned to him. The attraction on his own account was, he was there right away. She was a lot more careful, she said. She was 13 years his senior. She'd been around the industry long enough to know exactly what they'd say about a woman in her position falling for a younger man. And she was right about what they'd say because they said it for years. She tried to call it off early, music saying the age difference was too great, that it would lead to problems that good intentions couldn't solve. Hugh Jackman, armed with nothing but talent and what he called music, absolute certainty, would not take no for an answer. The age difference doesn't matter, he said. He told her she was the one he wanted. He popped the question 4 months into dating. They were married on April 11th, 1996 at St. John's Church, Toorak, Melbourne. Music, she was 40. He was 27 years old. And then she walked red carpets for the next 27 years, knowing that every tabloid photographer was making the comparison. Publicly, she grew old beside the man the world continually voted sexiest alive. She'd seen the comments. She read the papers. She heard it all. And Hugh told every interviewer who asked her that she was the love of his life, the basis of everything, the person without whom none of the rest of it would have been possible. In 2021, on their 25th wedding anniversary, he posted old wedding photos with a caption saying their love had only grown deeper with time, and that being with her was as natural, as if breathing. Such words, publicly repeated for a quarter century, and a woman constructs her life around them. She uses them to make decisions. She turns down opportunities. She moves around the world. She raises children, and she shows up every single day because she believes what the person next to her has told her publicly and privately is the truth. The story turns completely when what happened after the Broadway revival of The Music Man began rehearsals in February 2022. What happened in The Music Man? Hugh P.S. Jackman's Broadway revival of The Music Man began rehearsals in February 2022. His co-star was Sutton Foster, one of Broadway's most decorated performers. A 2-time Tony Award winner with a reputation of his own. The show ran through January 2023, almost a full year of nightly performances, press appearances, and a unique intimacy that grows between lead performers who share the stage every single night. Various sources and later reporting by Music US. During that run, the relationship between Hugh and Sutton became an open secret, as those inside the production said, on a week-to-week basis. Cast members reportedly saw them in a lot of physical closeness backstage. During interviews while the show was running, Sutton said that she and Hugh had a pre-show ritual, a time they set aside every night just to talk and connect before they went on stage. She described it publicly and warmly, which in retrospect reads differently than it might have appeared at the time. Sources close to Deborra-Lee say she felt a change had taken place. People close to her say that she felt that during the course of the production, an emotional affair had developed, whether or not it had crossed into anything physical while the marriage was still intact. And for a guy who was with one person for almost 3 decades, the difference between emotional and physical betrayal is less important than people outside the situation likely to assume. The wound is the turning away. How one turns is secondary. What makes the timeline of 2023 particularly difficult to sit with is the order of events. In April of that year, Hugh Music shared a public anniversary tribute to Deborra-Lee. The two attended the Met Gala together in May, walking the carpet as they had for years, projecting the image that had become one of Hollywood's most recognizable. 4 months after that, on September 15th, in 2023, they issued a joint statement saying they were separating after nearly 3 decades together. The way that statement was worded put their situation at a turning point in their journey, and the choice was made out of a desire for personal growth. It was the sort of language that is carefully designed to say the least possible while sounding considered and mutual. If you've ever had someone talk to you in careful, rehearsed language, when you already knew that their mind was made up, know exactly what is hidden in that wording. After that statement, Deborra-Lee said nothing publicly for close to 2 years. In May 2024, she was at a film event, and when a journalist asked what the last year had taught her, she said she had learned she was strong and resilient. That answer, given quietly and without elaboration, is the kind of thing you say when you're still in the midst of surviving something and you're not ready to say what it actually was. Sutton, meanwhile, in October 2024, Foster has filed for divorce from her husband of 10 years, screenwriter Ted Griffin. Ewan and Sutton were photographed together in Los Angeles in January 2025, confirming their relationship. What had been in the space between friendship and something else in a Music Man was now out in the open. The divorce, the penthouse, the paper trail. The financial architecture of the Jackman divorce tells its own story, and it is worth examining in some detail because the decisions Deborra-Lee made. The days before the filing show a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and had thought hard about protecting herself. 2 days prior to filing for divorce on May 21st, 2025, Deborra-Lee bought out her husband's share in their Manhattan penthouse for $1.7 million. She didn't wait to see how the asset split would go. She made the first move, put the property in her name, and filed. This progression is intentional. It is the product of legal and financial preparation that does not occur overnight. The divorce was finalized in June 2025. The marital estate was valued at $387 million, accumulated over almost 3 decades that included Hugh's X-Men franchise haul, his Broadway work, his various endorsements, and the properties the couple owned in Manhattan, the Hamptons, Australia, and England. The division of that estate has not been reported in full detail, but the overall size of what was being divided is a reflection of music, how much had been built in those 27 years. It was the first time Deborra-Lee had spoken in anything like direct terms about what had happened, in a public statement released around the time of the filing. She wrote about the traumatic experience of betrayal. She said it is a wound that cuts deep. She felt sorry for those others who had been in similar circumstances. The statement was short, but the word betrayal was used twice, which is not an accident when a person has had almost 2 years to decide what they want to say and how they want to express it. Hugh Jackman's answer to what was next reportedly created friction of its own. Deborra-Lee was said to be in discussions with publishers for a memoir about her marriage, divorce, and how she handled the fallout, according to multiple outlets. Music, there was genuine interest from a number of publishers, sources said, and she had kept voluminous personal notes that people familiar with the situation described as a divorce. Diary, during the whole period of separation. Hugh had been aware, apparently, that the book was a possibility and had hoped she would decide against it. Sources close to Hugh and Sutton described the project in terms that suggested anxiety, rather than indifference, about what it might contain music. A woman who kept the private details of her marriage private for 27 years, who said almost nothing publicly for 2 years after her separation, who chose her words with evident care when she finally did speak, is not one who would write a careless memoir or write it without knowing just what she means to say. Whether the book is an accurate depiction of what the separation really cost her, or a more measured version, the joint statement in September 2023 completely erased it. Her account of what happened. And she's clearly decided that version is worth holding on to. What 27 years really looked like. The public narrative of the Jackman marriage was almost entirely about its longevity and on Hugh's ongoing vocal devotion to his wife. What received a whole lot less attention all those years was what Deborra-Lee was doing with her time and what she sacrificed to make that marriage work the way it did. Deborra-Lee and Hugh tried for children after their 1996 wedding. There was IVF treatment and multiple miscarriages involved. Hugh spoke publicly about this period on several occasions. Deborra-Lee talked much less about it, which is an interesting detail about how she processed difficult experiences and which of them was more comfortable to use their private pain as public content itself. She carried that grief the way so many women of her generation carried it. not because she was unmarked, but because she had chosen some things to be private. When biological options did not deliver the result they wanted, they adopted. The couple had a son, Oscar, in 2000. They had a daughter, Ava, in 2005. Deborra-Lee became an ardent campaigner for adoption reform in Australia, advocating for legislative change and working to reduce stigma faced by adoptive families. She didn't see motherhood as a consolation prize. She viewed it as a cause to champion in public and a relationship to safeguard in private. And all that advocacy work, which spanned years and included direct interaction with Australian lawmakers, was all her own initiative. It was not about Hugh's career or his public image. It was something she made on her own platform, and with her own conviction at a time when adoption reform in Australia was really underfunded and politically neglected. And she made career decisions in those decades that reflected the realities of being the supporting partner in a marriage where one person's career was operating at a genuinely global scale. Hugh's musical commitments meant the family had to be mobile. Deborra-Lee continued with her own work where she could, including her part in Force of Nature, The Dry 2, which she was advertising in May 2024. But the scaffolding of her career was built within the constraints of being married to a man whose work schedule was dictated by franchise filming, Broadway runs, and international press tours. There were roles she turned down because it wasn't the right time for what the family needed. There were some projects which needed a stability of location that she could not give. These aren't the dramatic sacrifices that make headlines. They are the hush-hush costs of organizing a life around another's trajectory, and they are seldom counted as part of the actual content of a marriage, which is publicly accounted for. That special cost is something that only shows up in retrospect, when the marriage is over and you look back at the record of what each person gave and what each person got. Hugh got a solid home, a down-to-earth partner, an advocate, a co-parent, and someone who publicly defended him against every music tabloid rumor, including years of speculation about his personal life that Deborra-Lee consistently and quietly shut down just by being there, music and consistent. What she got was 27 years of public declarations that apparently were easier for him to make than they were for him to sustain. And then a joint statement in language crafted to make both of them sound equally responsible for an outcome that the subsequent timeline strongly suggests was not equally initiated. She's the one that tried to walk away from the get-go because she could see the risks. It was he who talked her out of it. 27 years later, the one who left wasn't the one who was afraid to stay. Now at your time, Deborra-Lee Furness proved every skeptic wrong for 27 years on whether that marriage would last. And it still happened the way it did. What does that say about public profession of love really telling you anything real about a relationship? And if she writes that memoir and allows the